I think success is freedom. I spent a large part of my career doing the things that I was asked, and now I've reached this place in my career where I call the shots.
In 2005, a 17-year-old in New York City had an idea. Salehe Bembury had enjoyed early exposure to the arts through his father's career as a photographer, but wanted professional security for himself. So when it came time for the sneaker-obsessed teen to contemplate life after school, he saw the best of both worlds in industrial design. That foundation, which married aesthetic with engineering, gave him a competitive advantage over his contemporaries. Now, a decade and a half later, he's created a handful of iconic new-to-world sneaker designs and worked with seemingly every brand, from Payless to Versace, Yeezy to Crocs. Today, he is the present and the future of footwear. And it all started with one idea. How did your parents' professional life inform your ambitions?
My dad's a photographer. He owned his business. We had a loft in Tribeca, so the first 1/4 of the loft was like a photography studio. So we would have a bunch of shoots there. He would shoot our family. Those would be like family moments. The ceilings were 20 feet, if you will, but the walls only went up 10 feet. So if someone was on the phone, you could hear them. And my dad was really good at networking. I knew that a part of his job was outreach. And it wasn't just the fact that he, pressed a button on a machine and used his perspective and eyes to create art, but it was also managing relationships and making himself seen in a time where you couldn't just post a picture to be seen. So I think that definitely influenced some level of how I approach my job. That now I probably realize in retrospect. I don't think I was 10 years old, this is how you network.
Tell me about your experience in high school. You grew up in Manhattan, you went to school on the Upper West Side at Calhoun. Did you know that you wanted to get into art as a serious passion when you were in high school?
I would say, if anything, high school was veered me off the track a little bit. One of my first memories was that they were making fun of me because my clothes didn't match, which was crazy to me, because that was almost like how you had your downtown stripes if your clothes didn't match. I thought at least Manhattan was one world, right? There are many worlds in New York, but I thought Manhattan was kind of like one world. And that quickly showed me that there are so many different bubbles.
In one of your interviews, you talked about how an older kid at school dressed up as you for Halloween. How did you sort of take that in as a kid?
I was devastated and embarrassed. But in retrospect, for a 10th grader to be dressing up as a 9th grader, I think that was more a flex on my behalf. If anything, it was, I think, a projection of my individuality that maybe he wasn't familiar with seeing. The most important idea I've ever had is to be myself. We spend a lot of our childhood and adolescence being unsure of who we are and the direction we're going in, and I think the day that I realized it was time to lean into that fully was the day I achieved that.
When you're exiting high school, you know that you're into art. Your parents are pushing you into more of a liberal arts or engineering, something along those lines.
Yeah, I always had the ability to draw and paint and work with my hands, and my parents had the insight to tell me to major in something that could potentially be a little bit more lucrative than majoring in drawing or painting. So they were like, you should probably look into industrial design or architecture. And architecture was buildings and math, and industrial design was product, and it was really broad. And with the extreme interest that I had in sneakers and footwear, that seemed like a path to kind of get there.
Explain what going to school for industrial design is really like.
All throughout life, we were surrounded by design. Good design is unseen. You don't even notice it. It just works. So industrial design is, I think, first getting us to realize the intent and the thought that's put into creativity and product design, and then getting us to understand the why and the history and the research that goes into creating that product. Once you get that foundation, then you can kind of slowly start to maybe have a point of view. If anything, I don't think I realized that a lot of the things that I learned in college until I was in the jobs, and then I would implement one of the things I learned, and I'd be like, oh my God, Professor Carr taught me this. Looking back, all those things I learned were implemented or at least accessed. I would say my advantage is versatility. I approach many design projects exactly the same because you're ultimately met with a design problem and you have to figure out an insight and then find your design solution. I think with that versatility, I can attack design projects with a perspective that many can't.
So you graduate, come back to the city, and you didn't really have much of a plan or an idea of where you were gonna go from there?
I remember those days so vividly. It was just scrolling Craigslist, applying to things, and then just watching that little 0 with the parentheses around it and just hoping it turned into a 1. Cause now it's crazy because now I can't keep my email, I wish it would go to 1.
You end up getting a job at Payless. Was that just one of 25 other places that you had applied?
I definitely did apply to a lot of places, but I think with Payless, it was like, even though it was Payless, it was still like a name. It wasn't a name that I was gonna be the most proud to say. I still believe that you are your resume, so I was just like, I need to just start this resume, and anyone reading that resume is gonna be like, oh, Payless. And this is something I say in retrospect, but they make every kind of shoe. So the fact that I was working on men's sneakers and women's heels and little girls birthday parties slides, I was getting probably the best introduction into a professional footwear experience. And then after Payless, there was this spot called Fortune Footwear that was in Tribeca. They felt like a level up because they were a licensed brand. So they did a lot of mall brands like BB and Steve Madden, and Beyonce's mom, Tina, had a brand called House of Darion.
So they would license the brand and then basically do all the design and fabrication.
Exactly. So they would pay them a certain amount and they would create all the styles and be here's your offering for fall, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not the most proud, but maybe they'll let me do something cool, or it's a little bit more money. So I started doing that, and I was pretty happy to be working on some multiple brands that people knew, and I met Tina Knowles. So I was like, this is awesome. But then simultaneously, Dame Dash had just opened up this space 4 or 5 blocks away called DD 172. He described it as an Andy Warhol factory, right? So there was fine art happening out of there. There was a magazine. There was digital content. He would do concerts in the basement.
The 99 person?
Yeah, it was called Under 100 because of the fire codes. And it just seemed like something I wanted to be a part of. And I'm coming from this Fortune Footwear, it looks like the show The Office. And it was just not fulfilling at all. And then this Dame Dash thing was I see people that look like me and they're working on cool things. And there's rappers that I recognize and would love to meet. And it's Dame Dash. So I just started going around there, hanging out. Met these guys, Dave Chang and Dave Barnett. They were the designers there, the graphic designers. At the time, I was almost more pursuing happiness than footwear because there was no footwear, but I just it felt right, and it felt momentum and excitement. And
what was the job interview for that?
Well, there was no job interview really. I just started hanging out with the Daves, Dave Barnett and Dave Chang, and I got a TV dinner table.
The little foldable
the
stand.
little foldable table, and I just took it into their office and I set it up, and I was I'm gonna work here now, guys. And they were kind of confused, but they respected it, and I started working there.
Working out of Dame's studio, I would imagine you also get to see Dame in his entrepreneurial glory. Was there anything in particular that you remember that specifically stuck with you in sort of his ethos or the way that he conducted himself?
With both Dame and Kanye, I think it'd always be interesting that if someone were to come to them and say we can't do this, they would both just be make it work. And I just thought there was something at the time with both of them really confusing of how do I make it work? But looking back, that something in them that just wouldn't accept an obstacle or wouldn't accept no, and that would, a lot of the time that would force me or that person to figure it out. So I think there's something to be said for that.
So how did you engineer your exit there?
The thing at Dame wasn't really stable, or I don't know what the future held there. It was more I think after the excitement of just wow, I'm partying, but I'm working at the same time. Once the excitement of that kind of dissolved, I kind of started thinking about footwear again.
Now equipped with experiences in a variety of professional environments, Salehe was eager to find a situation that offered both stability and growth. While he did find that at his next stop, Haan, the most important thing he found was a mentor in Jeff Henderson, a Nike veteran whose leadership and connections would ultimately set up Bembury for his breakout moment.
A recruiting agency put me in Haan. I think, again, I was just doing like color work, like small design input. And then I got word, maybe it was my second day, that this guy, Jeff Henderson, an OG Nike designer, I think he designed there for like 15 years. He was in the office. And I saw him, and he was this like tall black dude, and he was wearing these Jordans that I'd never seen before. So I was like, whoa, who is this guy, right? And so he was gonna get like toured around the office. And so I knew he was gonna walk by my desk. I'm okay at sketching. So I like flipped to like a nice sketch page, slid it to the edge of the table. And then when he walked by, he was like walking by, he was like, hey. And then he like saw the sketches, and he was like, whoa. Then he started flipping through. And then, yeah, he ended up asking if I wanted to join this innovation team that he was starting.
And this was the team that would eventually design the Lunar Grand?
Yes. And we were like this 3-person team, super nimble, and we were given the green light to kind of just like shake things up and really utilize Nike's resources.
So they had been purchased by Nike prior to you?
Yes.
What were the conversations you guys were having at the outset of the project?
To put it in a nutshell, it was really about like, taking this product that's existed the same for so long, which was like brown and black shoes, formal shoes, and the consumer had kind of come to accept the discomfort of them and the seriousness of them and the aesthetic of them. And we were kind of given the opportunity to take Nike innovation, Nike technology, and then our taste and create something new that wasn't gonna be too polarizing, maintain the seriousness of formal footwear, but then also bring this consumer to a new place. I remember the first time I wore them, I like ran to the train and then I looked down at my feet and I was like, oh. It was kind of like, I felt like this just new technology moment that I hadn't experienced before with a dress shoe.
Within the sort of confines of a brand that has been defined by making hard bottom shoes, was it embraced broadly internally?
Initially it was kind of opposed, but then I think we asked some very specific questions about why they didn't like it, and they were kind of not able to answer them. I think it was just more like from a gut feeling that they couldn't give any reasoning to. And then once we shot down all of the like unbacked up opinions, we were kind of able to like, bring it to life. Good ideas and bad ideas are somewhat subjective, but a lot of the time I think it comes down to taste. I believe I have taste, and through that I can decipher the two.
How did you know when your time at Haan had come to an end?
The brand is sold to Apex partners, so immediately the company initiatives change. I think they were more interested in selling units, whereas before it was about innovation and exploring the capabilities of product. I went from trying to figure out how to use Nike technology to take product to a new place to make a wingtip and make a boat shoe, which was nothing wrong with, but it wasn't at the time what was motivating me.
And did this separate you from Jeff as well?
Yes, actually it did separate me from him. He was kind of like my mentor at the time. I wasn't happy about that. I definitely kind of got this feeling that it was maybe time to move on.
How did you architect your next move?
The next stop was Greats. So Greats was this brand started by John Buscemi, who at the time I was a big fan of because he started Gourmet. So then I found out he's starting this brand, looking for a designer. I reach out. It was a great opportunity because I spent my entire career learning and listening, and this was the first opportunity that I had where I could teach and I could implement all the things that I'd learned over the years for this thing that they needed like guidance. And so at the time, it really felt like a new challenge.
So you were more in a senior design role at that?
Well, it was kind of more that I was just in charge of footwear. I don't even remember what my role was. It was just more like make some footwear. You're kind of running the ship. You understand development. You understand, factories and specs and correcting. And it was the first time where my superior would look at me and be like, "What should we do?"
And how did you know when it was time to move on?
I was fired from Greats. Yeah.
Was that traumatizing?
100%. Like a job is security. A paycheck is security. It represents food, it represents a roof. But for someone like me, it really makes me strap my boots even tighter and get back to it. I think all the times I've been unemployed were absolutely necessary. I think we're always growing. There's that famous Lauryn Hill quote, "If we're not growing, we're dead." So I strongly believe in that, and I think that we constantly always need to be looking for new perspectives and new ideas so that we can continue to grow as people and then influence those around us.
How long did it take you to sort of go through the cycle of beating yourself up and being mad about it to finally being like, okay, now I'm ready to make my next step forward?
I was still experiencing the grief, and then I'm on LinkedIn, and I see this guy, Rim Koolhaus, who is the nephew of the architect Rim Koolhaus. And he has this brand United Nude. Really interesting footwear, really architectural, really linear. And I hit him up and I'm like, hey, like, what's up? And he was like, oh, like I'm doing this design charrette, flying in some designers, I'd love to have you. So I fly to, I think it was Guangzhou, China. I stayed there for like 2 weeks, and it was this really intensive, just like design course of just like make what you think is cool through our brand lens. They like spent money to have me there to like create for them. So that felt like really interesting. And then I was getting to work on just like really forward things. So they were like somewhat alien and just not that average shoe that everyone kind of makes. Right after that, Jeff hits me and he's like, hey, I'm working with Kanye. He wants someone to move out to LA, and do you have any work you can send? And the fact that I was just working on this United Nude stuff that was really forward and really innovative, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Let me like send this stuff.
Where was Yeezy in its sort of growth?
I was there for season 3 and season 4. I guess it was like season 2 when all the conversation started.
Did you have any sort of expectation or apprehension?
No apprehension. The expectation was that it was just about to be like the craziest experience of my life. I just was like it was kind of like a buckle up thing where if I walked in and they were just doing something like next level that was kind of scary, I'd still like probably would have done it. But they were like, here, shoot this guy. I'd have been like, all right, this is easy. You know?
How many times?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was just like 100% on board.
But this was not your first meeting with Kanye West, as I understand it.
When I worked at Payless, I was going to lunch and I saw Kanye and Don C in a cab. He gets out, he's like walking into a building. I like booked down the block. I'm like, Kanye. And I think he was gonna ignore me because he thought I was like just like paparazzi or a fan. But then I was like, I design. And then he like froze, and that got him to like pay attention. He turns around, looks me up and down. The fit didn't really represent my personal style or anything he was necessarily trying to mess with. But then he like tapped Don C, and Don C took my info. I thought that was gonna be my moment. And he never hit me back, but it was kind of cool to have that full circle moment, yeah.
Kanye is obviously very dynamic, creative. What were sort of the most important things that you took away from that experience?
Kind of like not following rules. That might be like sound really obvious. I remember we released boots in the beginning of the summertime and people thought that was nuts, and they worked. And obviously it being Kanye, that he can break more rules than most. This is the Yeezy season 3 military boot. Traditionally with military boots, you never get to see like a brick color like this, but the consumer really reacted. And again, going back to our conversation about breaking rules, this was a perfect example of that, of releasing an orange boot at the beginning of the summertime and it working.
How does your life outside of the office change when you go from having these kind of like very behind the scenes jobs at less cool brands to being at the sort of zenith of hype, doing probably the most exciting stuff in footwear?
It was just kind of like Fight Club. You couldn't talk about it. So it was ironic that I was going from jobs where I didn't really care to talk about things, but I was allowed to. And then now I can let people know that I'm working there, but I can't, nothing beyond that really.
And how are you looking at this experience sort of in the more macro scope of your career as you're planning out, all right, well, I've got this step now, where am I gonna go from here?
I wasn't even thinking like that because at the time, I was like ready to give that job like 10 years because I was like, this seems like something that has so much, momentum, and Kanye is a visionary, and it's like unlike any brand that I've been a part of, and there's just such an opportunity here. So I was ready to like really invest a significant part of my career in that place. I was like really drinking the Kool-Aid.
So your time at Yeezy comes to a close and you decide to move on. How were you feeling about the experience in general and also about what that meant for your future?
It all happened kind of abruptly, so I really wasn't sure what that next step was. I was then kind of met with a year of unemployment / freelancing for brands that I wasn't proud to necessarily be associated with, but it was more about a paycheck and just a lot of like uncertainty of like what my value was. Had I reached the zenith of like footwear brands? Where do you go after Yeezy? All those kinds of things. And just like funds depleting rapidly. The biggest L I probably took was my job ending at Yeezy, because I, picked up my life, moved to California, and invested everything into that position. And there was a lot of soul searching and recalibration that needed to take place at that time. But it's those obstacles and those hard moments that mold us.
Searching for himself and his place within the industry, Salehe faced an uncertain future. He'd abruptly gone from designing at the most electric brand in footwear to collecting unemployment. Without a clear place to turn, he tried something that had worked once before, a cold message on LinkedIn. Only this time, the brand was Versace, and the eventual payoff beyond his wildest dreams. He got the chance to introduce the heritage fashion house to the sneaker market and to build his own brand on the side.
So I'm on LinkedIn. I see in the people you may know section, I see a Versace design director. So I reach out to him and I'm like, the sneaker industry is a multi-billion-dollar business. Growing up, it was always about brands with logos, Nike, New Balance, Adidas. And now we're in this space where this consumer is really open to the fact that fashion houses can make sneakers. Balenciaga starts making cool shoes. You got Adidas, Raf Simons, you got Nike, Comme des Garçons. I was like, it's an opportunity for you guys. You have such overt brand DNA, the Baroque print, the Medusa, the Greca, that's like that. And that could easily be translated into footwear. So, it's an opportunity for you guys and you should really jump in. And I feel like I'm the person that could, steer that ship. I don't know if I said that last part. And so I'm just fishing. And then 3 days later, Donatella hits me back and she's like, I love your ideas. Can you come to Milan and tell me more?
So you just look at your email one day and it's Donatella Versace.
Yeah, and it was the 0 went to a 1. Right? It wasn't like I had 7 emails, it was 1.
You've gotten a lot out of LinkedIn in your
career.
Oh,
for sure. I just would always just cold message people kind of hey, can I get an interview or can I be interviewed by you, or is there a job here or whatever? And it's funny because I've even met people that are like, hey, you emailed me 4 years ago. And I'm like, because I've just sent so many people over the years. But yeah, she was like, I want you to come to Milan and tell me more. I was gonna put together a few pages of trend of
I was gonna say, how much prep work did you go?
Well, since, this is something I've been breathing for my entire life, I was just gonna scroll down Hypebeast and grab some things. But then strangely, universe, whatever you wanna call it, the week leading up, spoke to a buddy's mom, and she was like, go to the store, see what's selling, do your market research. Spoke to another friend that was put sample design work in there, don't assume they know you can design. Spoke to someone else that reminded me that there's not too many people that look like me in the high fashion space. It's bigger than me, I'm paving a way, take it seriously. So what was gonna be a 3 or 4 page presentation turned into a 40-page presentation.
Had you had to prepare anything like that when you went to Yeezy?
Oh yeah. My rhyme is decks are the road to checks. I think that it's for creatives, one of the biggest issues for creatives is that bridge of communication to for lack of a better term, suits, right? And decks are really a good way of doing that because you get to use words and visual assistance to communicate your ideas.
So you show up at Donatella's house or office?
It was the office, yeah. So we meet one-on-one, show her all the different things. She's maybe a third of the way through, she's ecstatic, she starts bringing people in. I finish it and she's like, I love you. I was about to do my impression, I don't think I should do my impression. I was like, I love you and I wanna hire you. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. And then she asked me if I wanted to move to Milan or stay in LA or consult. And I was like, can I have my own studio in LA and I'll travel here once a month for shows and product approvals and meetings or whatever. And she was like, cool. And so instantly it just went from unemployment to I have a job, and it's a kind of a job that people seem to care about.
What is the process of starting to create a whole line of sneakers within a huge company like Versace?
Well, it was great because I reported directly to Donatella, so that made a lot of the potential obstacles go away.
And she is very hands-on as an operator of the business?
Very hands-on and very passionate about everything that she touches. So she was, but at the same time, she understood that sneakers weren't necessarily her forte, and she believed that coming from a place like Yeezy, I was an expert in the space, so she kind of just let me go. And for me, I just kind of had to identify the significant brand details. And then implementing my industrial design knowledge, I was like, can any of these things be functional? And the most functional thing was the chain. So started modeling it with clay, playing around. I had a friend 3D model up my sketches, and then I was able to go out to Milan and then present it to her and literally hand her a physical outsole. If I'm literally handing her that thing, there was no conversation that needed to be had. She was on board immediately. And then we got to work, made a shoe. This right here is the 3D print that I was mentioning earlier of showing Donatella.
What are the steps to go from there to having one of these?
So this 3D print was more about communicating form. I imagined that it would work as an outsole, but it kind of rocks. So, after you get your sign off for the concept, it's then about diving into making it work. Because the most important thing a shoe has to do is work. You have to think of these things at higher levels when you're actually creating shoes that are meant to function in like a sport. But for high fashion, it's really more about just keeping the consumer safe and not in pain.
So I know when you were doing your round of seeding, one of the most important people who ended up getting a pair of the sneakers was 2 Chainz. Can you tell me how that happened and how did that change the launch of the sneaker?
God put on the phone with him. I was like, hey man, I got this shoe that really aligns with your brand. We should figure out a way to do something. He was like, what do you mean? Like, let me see the shoe. So had him sign an NDA. And then I show him the shoe and he was like, oh my God, it's made of 2 Chainz. And like immediately he was like kind of sold by that. And then I think there was just a level of, if I was a white guy wearing a suit from Milan, the communication may not have been as successful, I brought him to Milan for the first show, and it was just like surreal to be walking into a Versace fashion show where the models are gonna be wearing my work, and I'm walking in with like this huge wrapper. And you have to think that like 2 months earlier, I'm trying to figure out where the next, the third month rent is gonna come from. And so things changed really drastically then. That was the foundation for the career I'm experiencing right now.
When you started working at Versace, did you have a feeling that this was going to be a temporary situation?
I've never been really good at like mapping out the future. I'm someone that like lives in the present. My memory isn't very good. It was more about just like attacking the now and really making sure that in this moment in time that I like execute it to the best of my abilities, and I realized that I'm in like a very unique position, and I've been giving like an insanely long, I don't want to call it leash necessarily, but just I have the reins.
Your first shoe there is an unmitigated success. What was the next sort of challenge presented to you?
I wanted to fill the buckets, the product buckets, right? So the chain reaction was the peacock product. When a peacock spreads its feathers, everyone looks. And then it was about, now we got to do like a really good runner. And then like we got to do a really good boot, and we got to do a really good slide. And it's like from a perspective of like merchandising, if we have what we believe to be the perfect version of this thing, then we're killing it. This was the follow-up to the chain reaction. So again, it was about identifying the brand DNA and then figuring out what we're gonna use to inject into the footwear, right? And this time it was the Greca. We didn't use it as functionally, it was more of an aesthetic piece. You obviously get some traction from that, but for the most part, we wanted to achieve just like a really cool runner.
How did you start to establish your brand outside of Versace?
The same way we are our resumes, we're also our Google searches. Most people when they meet people socially or professionally, like the first thing they do is Google them. So like I was like, I need my first page to be like lit. Anything I was a part of, I was just trying to like hit someone at Hypebeast, maybe even like when I wasn't supposed to. Like the amount of press I've gotten that I wasn't supposed to get. People know that I'm a part of things that people that I worked with and had the exact same amount of responsibility, the public does not know that they were a part of it. And I would argue that those little meticulous moves I made like ultimately helped my career in the long run.
So what changed that you started to look at the front door and think about what was next for you?
I think it was like my 3rd year. They were nice enough to allow me to do some collaborations. So I collaborated with New Balance and Anta. That kind of showed me that I have a little bit of an audience, and I got to like see a project play out while still having the security of my job at Versace. And then I guess I also felt like I accomplished everything I could accomplish at Versace. I created a footwear business there from scratch. For a few seasons, it was the top selling business in the company, which is unheard of for a fashion house. I created like an IT sneaker. It was like a VP or something fancy like that. And I just like was looking for a new challenge.
So when you start designing these collaborations under your name, did you have the idea of launching a proper brand as sort of the long-term goal?
going back to that freedom, like you were saying, like what is success, what does money give you? And I say it's mostly freedom. I think having a brand is freedom, because I've had to like meet certain deadlines or, make something blue because like it's like, wintertime or whatever. And now I'm just kind of like the Kanye making a boot in the beginning of the summertime situation. Like I'm just doing what I want, and it feels really good. And then the audience is responding still, so it's letting me know that I'm making the right decisions.
When did you launch Spunge?
It's established in 2020, so I guess after Versace, but then it took some time to actually get some tangible things out there. There's been one drop and a couple of collaborations, and I'm about to do another drop. Been offered a lot of investments for it, and I have zero interest because I just want to like fund it myself and just like have it be my thing.
What was that feeling of setting up your online store, putting those first SKUs up for sale and selling out, and seeing that you actually no longer do need any outside anything?
Well, it was extremely empowering because it showed me that I can get people to react to what I create without the help of any other, brand association, and gave me a perspective of quantities, price point, all the things that you need to know when it comes to a consumer.
And what did you learn?
I learned that there's a large group of people that associate my product with experience, which I think is really powerful. They will take my shoes and bring it with them to nature or camp, and I kind of want to like take that insight and really explore it and create things that really influence a whole group of people to experience.
In 2021 with the Crocs, that was really like a coming out moment for you. What are the next things that you want to check off on your bucket list as you build your brand?
I had an interesting conversation with Ronnie Feig where he was saying that a lot of the time these days people are doing like one-off collaborations and they move on to the next brand, and he was like, he believes in long-term partnerships. So he was like, you should really identify the brands that like resonate with you the most, that you feel like you have a really good rapport with and that you've created a great product with, and you should like, stick there and explore that. This is the first 3D print that we created for the Croc.
And where did the idea for the fingerprint come from?
I started thinking about how all great artists and designers have a consistent aesthetic or a visual identity. It kind of just happened organically. I just started like drawing lines, and it started to feel like the wood grain, and then it started to feel like the fingerprint. With a lot of my collaborations, I've explored that from a 2D perspective, but for this Croc, I really wanted to explore it from a 3D standpoint. Similar to the chain reaction, how I took a brand element and I made it functional, I really wanted to now take my brand element and explore how it could be functional and balance that with the Crocs heritage.
You started your career in industrial design, moved through the footwear industry, ended up at a high fashion house, and now are in a situation where you're being courted by parties from all sides. Where do you want to be?
I'm kind of there right now. You see this space, like it's a great environment to create in, and people seem to love my work. For the longest time, I would walk into meetings with companies and I would need them. The way that meeting went would really like make or break my day, my week, or my month. Now I've taken meetings, some with like fashion houses, where like, sure, like it'd be cool to work with them, but like I don't need them. And if the deal doesn't work out, like I'm good. That feels like the ultimate freedom.